The drought had turned mercy into a luxury few could afford. Mira knew this as she knelt beside the shallow river, watching the last of the valley's lifeblood trickle between parched stones. 7 months since the rain had abandoned them. 3 since the last of her people had been slaughtered in the winter snow. She still dreamed of silver eyes and blood-stained fangs. Still heard the desperate pleas of her family as the wolf pack tore through their settlement. Still felt the cold earth against her cheek as she hid beneath gnarled roots. The massive silver wolf pausing above her hiding place before moving on, leaving her alone among the dead. Why had she been spared when 37 others perished? Now she lived as a ghost in a dying land, her days measured by the dwindling water in her clay jug, her nights haunted by memories of what she had lost. She had survived winter's violence, only to face summer's slow starvation. Perhaps that was justice, to witness the end of all things, including herself. But when the wounded wolf collapsed at her feet, its silver fur matted with blood, its eyes the same molten silver that haunted her nightmares, Mira's hands moved of their own accord. Mercy, it seemed, was not something she could surrender, even when facing the beast that had destroyed everything she loved. She couldn't know that by morning, her small act of compassion would bring an army to her door, or that the alpha she saved would claim her life as his to protect. She couldn't know that among enemies who saw her as witch and traitor, she would find something she thought forever lost. As she offered water to the dying wolf, Mira couldn't know that some debts can only be paid in blood, and some bonds once formed can never be broken. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The drought had transformed the valley into a wasteland of cracked earth and withered foliage. 3 months without rain had reduced the once rushing river to a meager trickle, barely enough to sustain the few stubborn plants that refused to surrender to the merciless sun. Mira knelt beside the shallow water, carefully filling her clay jug with methodical patience. Every drop mattered now. Not much left, she muttered to herself, brushing a strand of copper hair from her sweat-dampened forehead. The evening air offered little respite from the day's heat, and the horizon shimmered with the promise of another scorching day tomorrow. Her small hut stood a quarter-mile uphill, partially concealed by a cluster of ancient oak trees that had somehow survived the drought. It wasn't much, just a single room with walls of stone and timber, a thatched roof that needed mending, and a hearth that had grown cold with disuse. But it was hers, her refuge since the massacre that had taken everything else. Mira secured the cap on her jug and stood, wincing at the protest of her stiff knees. The weight of the water made her arms tremble, but she had learned to treasure the burden. Without it, she would join the ranks of the dead who littered the valley's outskirts, humans and animals alike, all victims of nature's cruelty. The twilight deepened as she made her way home, casting long shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the barren landscape. The moon, a thin crescent, provided little illumination, forcing Mira to navigate by memory and instinct. She had walked this path countless times, knew every dip and rise, every protruding rock that threatened to trip the unwary traveler. A low growl stopped her mid-step. The sound came from somewhere to her right, hidden among the sparse bushes that dotted the hillside. Mira froze, her heartbeat accelerating to a frantic rhythm. Predators were rare in these parts, especially now with game so scarce. But desperation made even the most docile creatures dangerous. She slowly lowered the jug to the ground, freeing her hands. The small knife strapped to her thigh would offer little protection against a determined attacker, but it was better than nothing. "Show yourself," she called, her voice steadier than she expected. "I have nothing worth taking." Another growl, weaker this time, followed by a rustling of leaves. And then, emerging from the shadows like a specter, came a wolf. Mira's blood turned to ice in her veins. The beast was massive, its shoulders easily reaching her waist, with fur the color of tarnished silver in the fading light. Blood matted its left flank, dark and viscous, trailing behind it like a macabre banner. Each labored step seemed to cost it tremendous effort, yet it advanced toward her with single-minded determination. But it was the eyes that made Mira's heart stop, eyes of molten silver, unnaturally bright even in the gathering darkness. Eyes she had seen before, on the night her world ended. "You," she whispered, horror constricting her throat. The silver wolf, the monster that had led the attack on her pack's settlement 8 months ago. during the bitter cold of winter. She had watched from her hiding place as it tore through her people, its massive jaws ending lives with terrifying efficiency. That night, hidden in a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient tree, Mira had stared into those same silver eyes as the beast paused above her shelter. For reasons she never understood, it had turned away, leaving her the sole survivor of a slaughter that claimed 37 lives, including her parents and younger brother. Now, here it stood, wounded and weakened, yet no less terrifying. The wolf staggered, its legs buckling beneath it. With a pitiful whine, it collapsed to the ground, its chest heaving with labored breaths. Blood continued to seep from its wound, staining the parched earth beneath it. Mira should have run, should have left this creature to the fate it deserved. Instead, she found herself rooted to the spot, watching as life slowly drained from her people's killer. "This is justice," she told herself, but the words rang hollow in her ears. The wolf's eyes remained fixed on her, holding neither threat nor plea, just a strange resignation that seemed almost human. Its breathing grew more shallow with each passing moment. Before she realized what she was doing, Mira had retrieved her water jug and approached the fallen predator. Kneeling beside it, close enough to feel the heat radiating from its massive body, she uncapped the jug. "I should let you die," she said softly, meeting its silver gaze. "You deserve no mercy." The wolf made no response, save for the continued rise and fall of its chest. With trembling hands, Mira poured a small amount of water into her cupped palm and held it near the wolf's muzzle. "Drink," she commanded, not entirely sure why she was offering sustenance to the creature that haunted her nightmares. For a long moment, the wolf remained motionless, its eyes never leaving hers. Then, with obvious effort, it extended its neck and lapped at the water in her hand. The sensation of its rough tongue against her palm sent shivers down Mira's spine. She repeated the process several times until the wolf turned its head away, refusing more. Taking this as her cue, Mira set aside the jug and examined the creature's wound. A deep gash ran along its left flank, the edges ragged and inflamed. "Arrow wound," she murmured, recognizing the distinctive pattern. "Someone tried to hunt you. Pity they failed." Despite her harsh words, Mira found herself reaching for the small pouch of herbs she kept tied to her belt, a healer's habit she couldn't seem to break, even when faced with an enemy. She crushed dried yarrow leaves between her fingers and pressed them against the wound, eliciting a pained growl from the wolf. "Be still," she admonished, as if addressing a willful child rather than a predator capable of tearing out her throat. "This will help stop the bleeding." Night had fully descended by the time Mira finished tending to the wolf's wound. She had cleaned it as best she could with the limited water remaining, applied a poultice of herbs to draw out any infection, and bound it with strips torn from the hem of her already tattered skirt. Throughout the procedure, the wolf had remained surprisingly docile, only occasionally tensing when her ministrations caused particular discomfort. "That's all I can do," Mira said, sitting back on her heels. "The rest is up to you." The wolf's eyes had grown heavy, its breathing steadier now. It seemed to be drifting toward sleep. The immediate crisis passed. Mira gathered her nearly empty water jug and stood. "I've done more than you deserve. Don't make me regret it." With that, she turned and continued her journey home, leaving the silver wolf to whatever fate awaited it. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, as if invisible chains were trying to drag her back to the wounded creature. But Mira refused to give in to the strange compulsion. She had done enough, too much, really, for the beast that had destroyed her family. By the time she reached her hut, night had fully embraced the valley. Mira barred her door and sank onto her simple cot, physical and emotional exhaustion claiming her immediately. Her dreams were a chaotic blend of silver eyes, blood-soaked snow, and the haunting howls that had preceded the slaughter of her pack. She awoke to silence. This, in itself, was unusual. The dawn chorus of birds, diminished though it was by the drought, typically served as her alarm. Mira sat up, instantly alert, her instincts warning of something amiss. A strange tension hung in the air, an expectant hush that raised the fine hairs on her arms. Moving quietly, she approached the single window of her hut and peered outside. What she saw made her heart stutter. Wolves. Dozens of them. Their massive forms surrounded her small dwelling, standing in silent ranks that stretched into the distance. Some were dark as midnight, others the color of sun-bleached bone. but all possessed the unnatural stillness of predators awaiting their prey. At their center, directly before her door, stood a man. He was tall, towering over his lupine companions, with shoulders broad enough to block out the rising sun behind him. His hair, the exact shade of tarnished silver as the wolf she had aided, hung loose to his shoulders, framing features that might have been considered handsome were they not set in such a forbidding expression. He wore a sleeveless leather jerkin that exposed arms corded with muscle and marked with the scars of countless battles. But it was his eyes that made Mira's breath catch. Eyes of molten silver, unnaturally bright even in the morning light. The same eyes she had looked into twice before, once on the night of the massacre, and again yesterday when she had tended the wounded wolf. Impossible. Yet, as she stared at the imposing figure, Mira noticed the bandage visible beneath the torn edge of his jerkin, in the exact location where she had dressed the wolf's wound. A shapeshifter. Not just any shapeshifter, but an alpha, the leader of a wolf pack. Mira had heard tales of such beings, of course. Humans who could don the shape of beasts at will, who lived in isolated packs governed by ancient laws. But they were creatures of legend. Bogeymen used to frighten children into obedience, not flesh and blood reality. Before she could process this revelation, a heavy fist pounded on her door. "Human healer," a deep voice called, its timbre resonating with unmistakable authority. "I would speak with you." Mira considered her options. Her small knife would be useless against even one of these creatures, let alone an entire pack. Running was equally futile. They would catch her before she made it 100 paces, which left only one choice. With shaking hands, she unbarred the door and pulled it open, coming face to face with the silver-eyed alpha. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He stood nearly a foot taller than her, his presence filling her small doorway and blocking out the light. The scent of pine and wilderness clung to him, alongside the metallic tang of blood, his own, she presumed, from the arrow wound. "You tended my wounds last night," he stated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. Mira managed a stiff nod, unable to trust her voice. "Why?" The question was blunt, his silver eyes boring into hers as if trying to extract the answer directly from her mind. Mira swallowed hard, forcing down her fear. "I am a healer. It's what I do." A muscle twitched in the alpha's jaw. "You knew what I was, what I had done to your pack." It wasn't a question, but Mira answered anyway. "Yes." "And still you offered aid." "Yes." The alpha's gaze didn't waver. "You could have killed me. I was defenseless." "Yes," Mira agreed, her voice growing steadier. "I could have. Yet you chose mercy." Mira had no answer for that. She wasn't entirely sure herself why she had helped the creature responsible for so much death and pain. It had been an instinct, a compulsion she couldn't explain. The alpha studied her for another long moment, then stepped back, gesturing to the world outside her door. "Do you know who I am, human?" Mira moved cautiously to the threshold, surveying the sea of wolves that surrounded her home. "You're the alpha of the northern pack," she guessed, recalling fragments of stories whispered around campfires. "The one they call the Silver Wolf." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his face before it settled back into its impassive mask. "I am Kale, Alpha of the Northern Territories, and you have placed me in your debt." Mira blinked, certain she had misheard. "Debt?" "Our laws are clear," Kale said, his tone suggesting this was common knowledge. "A life saved creates a blood debt. Until it is repaid, your life is mine to protect." "That's absurd," Mira protested before she could stop herself. "I don't want your protection. I want you to leave me in peace." A low murmur ran through the assembled wolves, and Kyle's expression hardened. "It is not a matter of what you want, healer. The debt exists whether you acknowledge it or not." "Then consider it repaid," Mira said, desperation lending her courage. "You owe me nothing." "It does not work that way." The alpha's voice had dropped to a dangerous growl. "The debt can only be satisfied by saving your life in return, or by providing service of equal value. Then wait until I'm in danger and save me. It shouldn't take long with this drought." Kale's lips twitched, almost forming what might have been a smile. "Unfortunately, the terms of the debt require more immediate action. You will come with us to the fortress." "What?" Mira took an involuntary step backward. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You misunderstand, human. This is not a request." Kyle gestured around them. "Your valley is dying. The drought will claim all who remain within a moon's turn. At the fortress, at least, you will have water and protection until the debt is fulfilled. Mira glanced over her shoulder at the interior of her small hut. Everything she possessed in the world was here, meager though it was. The thought of abandoning it made her chest ache. This is my home. It will be your tomb if you stay. The Alpha's voice held no pity, only cold certainty. And if I refuse to go with you? This time Kale did smile, a predator's grin that displayed teeth too sharp to be fully human. Then I will bind you and carry you there myself. The choice of comfort is yours. The destination is not. Mira looked past him to the wolves surrounding her home, their stillness unnerving in its completeness. There was no fighting this, no clever solution that would allow her to remain. May I gather my things? She asked, defeat bitter on her tongue. Kale nodded once. You have until midday. Then we depart. With that, he turned and strode away, his silver hair catching the morning light. The wolves parted before him like water, closing ranks again once he had passed. Mira retreated into her hut, shutting the door with trembling hands. She leaned against it, allowing herself one moment of weakness, one silent scream of rage and fear that no one would hear. Then she straightened her spine and began to pack. Her possessions were few, some clothing, herbs and medicines, a small cooking pot, the knife she wore on her thigh, and a worn leather-bound journal that had belonged to her mother. Everything fit into a single canvas sack that she could carry over one shoulder. As she worked, Mira's mind raced with questions. Why had Kale attacked her settlement in the first place? What did he intend to do with her once they reached this fortress of his? And perhaps most troubling of all, why did the debt he claimed exist at all? It made no sense for predators to honor such obligations to their prey. By midday, Mira was ready. She stood in the doorway of her hut, gazing one last time at the place that had been her sanctuary. It wasn't much, but it had been hers. Now, like everything else, it would be taken from her. Outside, the wolves had grown restless, pacing and snapping at one another as they awaited her emergence. Of Kale, there was no sign. Mira stepped into the harsh sunlight, her sack slung over her shoulder. Immediately, all canine eyes fixed upon her, a collective stare that made her skin crawl. A massive black wolf detached itself from the pack and approached her, its amber eyes assessing. As it drew near, its form rippled and changed, bones cracking and realigning until a man stood in its place. He was shorter than Kale, but no less intimidating, with skin as dark as his wolf form and a face marred by 3 parallel scars that ran from his right temple to his jaw. He wore leather armor similar to Kale's, though his bore intricate patterns carved into the surface. I am Vero, Beta of the Northern Pack, he introduced himself, his voice carrying the same growling undercurrent as Kale's. The Alpha sent me to escort you. Where is he? Mira asked, scanning the assembled wolves. Hunting. Vero's tone suggested this should be obvious. We travel far today, and you will need food. As if on cue, Mira's stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday's meager breakfast. I have some dried fruit, she offered. Vero snorted. Human food. It will not sustain you for the journey ahead. Before Mira could argue, the Beta turned away, shifting back into his wolf form, with a fluid grace that belied the violent sounds of transformation. He nudged her leg with his massive head, clearly indicating that she should follow. With one last glance at her hut, Mira stepped forward into the unknown, a lone human surrounded by creatures from her darkest nightmares. The journey north began under the merciless afternoon sun. The wolves set a relentless pace, with Vero leading, and the rest forming a loose circle around Mira. They paused only twice during that first day, once at a small spring where she could refill her water skin, and again when Kyle rejoined them, a freshly killed deer slung over his shoulders. The Alpha acknowledged her with a curt nod, but said nothing as he handed the carcass to 2 wolves, who promptly dragged it aside to be butchered. Within minutes, chunks of raw venison were being distributed among the pack, with a portion set aside and cooked over a hastily built fire for Mira's benefit. The meal was silent, the wolves eating with efficient hunger while Mira picked at her portion, her appetite diminished by the gravity of her situation. Kyle watched her from across the fire, his silver eyes reflecting the flames with an intensity that made it difficult to meet his gaze. Eat, he commanded when she set aside her half-finished meal. You will need your strength. I'm not hungry, Mira replied, though it was a lie. The truth was that every bite felt like a surrender. an acceptance of her captivity. Kale's eyes narrowed. Pride will not serve you here, healer. Eat, or I will have Varro feed you like a pup. The threat, delivered in that same emotionless tone, sent a chill down Mira's spine. She picked up her food and forced herself to continue eating, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. They traveled until well after nightfall, stopping only when the moon was high overhead. No shelter was erected. The wolves simply circled around a small clearing, their bodies forming a living barrier between Mira and the wilderness beyond. Kale approached her as she huddled against the base of a tree, attempting to find a comfortable position for sleep. We will reach the fortress by tomorrow's sunset, he informed her, crouching to her level. Try to rest. The terrain grows more difficult from here. Mira nodded tiredly, too exhausted to argue or question. As Kale turned to leave, however, a thought struck her. Why did you attack my settlement? She asked, the question that had been plaguing her since she recognized him. Kale went still, his back to her. For a long moment, Mira thought he would ignore her query entirely. Then, without turning, he answered, Your people were harboring my enemies. What enemies? We were a peaceful settlement, farmers and craftspeople. We had no quarrel with your kind. Now Kale did turn, his silver eyes gleaming in the darkness. The southern pack had taken refuge among you. They wore human forms and played at being human, but they were wolves. Wolves who had slaughtered my kin and sought sanctuary in your midst. Mira frowned, trying to reconcile this information with what she knew of her former neighbors. That's impossible. We would have known. Would you? Kyle's voice held a bitter edge. Can you tell a wolf from a man when he chooses to hide his nature? Mira had no answer for that. Sleep, healer, Kyle said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. Tomorrow will test your endurance. He moved away, leaving Mira alone with her thoughts. She stared up at the stars, trying to make sense of this new information. Had there truly been shapeshifters living among her people, hiding their true nature? It seemed fantastical, yet here she was, surrounded by evidence that such beings existed. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of silver eyes and blood-soaked snow, of wolves wearing human faces, and humans with wolves' hearts. And through it all, a persistent question. If Kale spoke the truth, did that mean the slaughter of her pack had been justified? The thought was too terrible to contemplate. Morning arrived with a brisk wind that carried the promise of cooler days ahead. Mira awoke stiff and disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until a low growl nearby reminded her of her predicament. The wolf pack was already stirring, some resuming their human forms while others remained as beasts. Varro approached, offering her a water skin and a handful of berries. The alpha hunts again, he informed her, his scarred face impassive. We move in his absence. Mira accepted the meager breakfast with a nod of thanks, forcing herself to eat despite her lingering unease. As she did, she studied the pack members more openly, noting the hierarchy evident in their interactions. Varro, as Beta, was clearly respected, with others deferring to his commands, but there was none of the fear or tension she might have expected in a group led by someone as intimidating as Kale. Your alpha, she began, choosing her words carefully. He said my settlement was harboring his enemies. Varro's amber eyes narrowed. The southern pack. Yes. Did you know them? The ones hiding among us? The Beta's expression darkened. I knew them well enough to recognize their stench. They killed Kale's mate and unborn child 3 winters past, when they attacked our previous settlement. We have hunted them ever since. Mira's heart stuttered at this revelation. His mate? Lysara. Varro's voice softened slightly at the name. She was kind, a rarity among our kind. The unexpected glimpse into Kale's past left Mira momentarily speechless. It was easier to think of him as a monster, a force of nature without feelings or vulnerabilities. The image of him grieving, of seeking vengeance for a slain mate and child, was unsettlingly human. Before she could pursue this line of questioning further, Varro straightened, his posture suddenly alert. He returns. Prepare yourself. Indeed. Moments later, Kale emerged from the forest, a brace of rabbits slung over his shoulder. His silver eyes immediately sought Mira, assessing her with that same inscrutable gaze. We move, he announced to the pack at large, tossing the rabbits to a group of younger wolves. The fortress awaits. And so their journey continued, into landscapes Mira had never seen. The flat, drought-stricken valley gave way to rolling hills, then to increasingly rugged terrain, marked by jagged outcroppings of stone and dense patches of forest. The air grew cooler as they ascended, carrying hints of pine and something else, a mineral tang that suggested proximity to significant bodies of water. Kale set a brutal pace, clearly testing her endurance. Mira refused to complain, even as her muscles screamed in protest and her lungs burned with the effort of keeping up. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her weakness. By late afternoon, they crested a final ridge, and Mira's breath caught at the sight before her. A massive fortress rose from the mountainside, its walls of dark stone blending seamlessly with the natural rock formations around it. It was not beautiful in any conventional sense. There were no delicate towers or ornate decorations, but it possessed a raw, elemental power that commanded respect. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs on either side, feeding into a deep moat that encircled the structure. "The Northern Fortress," Kale announced, coming to stand beside her. "Your home until the debt is repaid." Mira stared at the imposing structure, a strange mix of dread and fascination washing over her. Whatever awaited her within those walls would forever change the course of her life. As if reading her thoughts, Kale added, his voice uncharacteristically gentle, "Fear not, healer. No harm will come to you under my protection." Somehow, the promise offered little comfort. The fortress loomed larger with each step, its dark stone walls rising like a mountain from the earth. Massive iron gates stood open in silent welcome, guarded by wolves whose muscular forms transformed into equally formidable humans as Kale's party approached. They bowed their heads to their alpha, though Mira didn't miss the curious glances cast in her direction. "The human stays close," Kale commanded, as they passed through the gates. "Anyone who harasses her answers to me." The interior of the fortress was a study in controlled chaos. Wolves in both human and animal forms moved purposefully across the open space, carrying supplies, training with weapons, or engaged in what appeared to be ritualistic combat. Stone buildings hugged the perimeter, designed for function rather than beauty. At the center stood a great hall, its entrance framed by towering pillars carved with wolf images. It was to this building that Kale led her, his stride purposeful. "You will be given quarters near my own," he informed her. "A healer's skills are valuable, and you will be expected to use them in service to the pack." "I don't recall agreeing to that," Mira replied, struggling to keep pace with his longer strides. Kale cast her a sideways glance. "Would you prefer to sit idle?" "That can be arranged, though I doubt you would find it satisfying." Mira bit back a retort. The prospect of using her healing knowledge did hold appeal, despite her circumstances. "I will need supplies. Herbs, bandages, clean water." "You will have what you require," Kyle assured her. "Varro will see to it." As if summoned, the Beta appeared at Kyle's side. "The council awaits, Alpha," he murmured. "They are displeased about the human's presence." A muscle twitched in Kyle's jaw. "Let them be displeased. The law is clear. They question whether the debt applies when the life saved belongs to an Alpha," Varro pressed. "Some suggest that your life belongs to the pack, not to yourself, and therefore—" "Enough," Kale cut him off. "I will address their concerns directly. Take the healer to her quarters and see that she is provided with whatever she needs." With that, he strode away, leaving Mira alone with the Beta, whose scarred face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Come," Varro said, "and try not to make eye contact with anyone. Some of the younger wolves have limited control." Mira followed silently, acutely aware of the stares that tracked her progress across the courtyard. She kept her gaze fixed on Varro's broad back, refusing to let them see her discomfort. The Beta led her to a stone building attached to the Great Hall. Inside, a narrow corridor branched off in several directions, lit by torches set at regular intervals. "The Alpha's quarters," Varro explained, indicating a heavy wooden door at the far end. "Yours are here." He pushed open a door halfway down the hall, revealing a chamber that, while austere, was far more comfortable than Mira had anticipated. A bed with a straw mattress stood against one wall, covered with furs. A small table and chair occupied the center, beside a hearth where a fire already crackled. A wooden chest at the foot of the bed presumably contained additional supplies. Most surprising, a window overlooking the courtyard allowed natural light to flood the space. "This will serve as both your living quarters "And your healing room," Vero informed her. "Water can be drawn from the well in the courtyard. As for herbs, I'll need to gather my own," Mira interrupted. "I must know what grows here if I'm to be effective." Vero hesitated. "The forest around the fortress is not safe for humans to wander alone." "Then provide an escort," Mira suggested. "Unless you'd prefer your wounded to suffer while I make do with whatever dried herbs you happen to have." A flicker of amusement crossed the beta's features. "You have spirit, human. That will serve you well here. Or get you killed. I'll speak to the Alpha about your request." With that, he departed, leaving Mira alone to explore her new prison. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mira tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife at her thigh. "Enter," she called, keeping her voice steady. The door opened to reveal a young woman with auburn hair, braided away from a face that might have been considered pretty, were it not for the calculating coldness in her amber eyes. "So you're the human who saved our Alpha," she said, her voice melodic despite the undercurrent of hostility. "I expected someone more impressive." "I'm sorry to disappoint," Mira replied dryly. "Who are you?" The woman smiled coldly. "I am Lysithea, daughter of Elder Theron, and future mate of the Alpha." The statement took Mira a moment to process. "Future mate? Indeed. Our union will strengthen both our bloodlines and ensure the continued prosperity of the Northern Pack." "Congratulations," Mira said flatly. "Was there something you needed from me?" Lysithea's smile sharpened. "Merely to satisfy my curiosity, and to offer some friendly advice." She moved closer. "Do not mistake the Alpha's protection for affection, little healer. You are a curiosity, nothing more. Once the debt is repaid, you will be sent back to your dying valley, and all will continue as it should." Mira refused to be intimidated. She rose to her feet, bringing herself eye to eye with the shifter woman. "I have no interest in staying here longer than necessary. The sooner this debt is fulfilled, the sooner I can return to my life." Lysithea studied her for a long moment. "Good. Then we understand each other." With that, she left, the door closing firmly behind her. Another knock sounded, firmer this time, more authoritative. It was Cale who stepped through the doorway, his imposing figure filling the small room. A silver medallion hung at his throat, bearing the same wolf imagery she had noticed on the pillars outside. "You met Lysithea," he stated. Mira nodded. "She introduced herself as your future mate." Something flickered in Cale's silver eyes. "It is a match favored by the Council," he acknowledged, his tone neutral. "But that is not why I came. Vero tells me you wish to gather herbs from the forest." "Yes. If I'm to serve as healer here, I need to know what resources are available." Kyle considered this. "The forest is dangerous, even for those of us who can shift forms. For a human alone, it would mean certain death. I'm not asking to go alone," Mira clarified. "I need an escort." "I will take you myself," Kyle decided, surprising her. "Tomorrow, after the morning meal. There are matters I must attend to first." Mira blinked. "You're the Alpha. Surely you have more important duties than babysitting a human herb gatherer." A ghost of a smile touched Cale's lips. "The debt is mine to repay, healer, and there are things in the forest that even my warriors fear to face." Before Mira could question this, he continued, "Food will be brought to you shortly. Rest well. Dawn comes early in the mountains." With that, he departed, leaving Mira to ponder the strange dynamics at play within the Northern Pack. Dawn arrived with a soft knock at her door and a young wolf bearing breakfast. "The Alpha says to be ready in an hour," the boy informed her, his voice cracking slightly. "He will come for you himself." Mira thanked him, surprised when he lingered. "Was there something else?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "Is it true you saved the Alpha's life?" "I helped a wounded wolf," Mira replied carefully. "I didn't know he was your Alpha at the time." "But you're human," the boy persisted. "And he attacked your pack." Mira's chest tightened. "Yes, he did. Then why—" "Luca!" Varro appeared behind him. "The Alpha did not give permission for questions." The boy ducked his head. "I meant no disrespect, Beta. Return to your duties," Varro commanded. Luca cast one last curious glance at Mira before scurrying away. "Curiosity is natural," Varro said finally. "But be cautious in what you reveal. Not all here are pleased by your presence." "So I've gathered," Mira replied dryly. "Your Alpha's future mate made that quite clear." Varro's expression shifted. "Lysithea speaks out of turn," The mating has not been decided. He handed her a leather satchel and a small knife with a bone handle. The blade is sharp enough for cutting plants, but too dull to pose a threat. The Alpha insisted you have proper tools. Mira accepted the gifts with murmured thanks. Kale appeared precisely 1 hour later, dressed for the forest in sturdy leather garments. A sword hung at his hip. "You're prepared?" he asked. Mira nodded. "I'm ready." They left the fortress through a small side gate. The forest began almost immediately beyond the walls, dense and ancient, its towering pines creating a cathedral of living wood. Kyle set a pace that was brisk but manageable. They walked in silence for a time. "What herbs do you seek, healer?" Kale finally asked. "Yarrow grows in abundance here," Mira replied, gesturing to a cluster of feathery-leaved plants. "It's excellent for wounds and bleeding. And there," she pointed to a patch with small purple flowers. "Thyme, good for coughs and infections of the chest." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "My people rely primarily on our enhanced healing abilities, but there are ailments that resist even a shifter's recovery. Your knowledge could prove valuable." "Is that why you brought me here? To serve as healer to your pack?" "No," Kale replied simply. "I brought you here because the law demanded it. Your service as healer is a beneficial consequence, not the intention." Mira met his gaze directly. "And what exactly is required to fulfill this debt? How long must I remain your captive?" "You are not a captive," Kale corrected. "The debt requires that I preserve your life as you preserved mine. In practical terms, that means ensuring your survival through the coming winter, a feat that would have been impossible in your drought-stricken valley. So once winter passes, I'm free to leave?" Kale's expression grew guarded. "If that is your wish, yes, assuming the debt has been adequately discharged by then." Before Mira could question him further, a low growl emanated from the underbrush. Kale stiffened, his hand moving to his sword. "Stay behind me," he ordered, "and whatever happens, do not run." From the shadows emerged a beast unlike any Mira had ever seen. It resembled a wolf in basic structure, but its body was grotesquely misshapen, with an oversized head and limbs that seemed too long and jointed in the wrong places. Its fur, patchy and dull, revealed diseased skin beneath. But it was the eyes that truly horrified, empty orbs that held no intelligence, only mindless hunger. "What is that?" Mira whispered. "A cursed one," Kale replied grimly, drawing his sword. "Once it was one of us, a shifter. Now it is neither wolf nor human, but something broken." The creature charged without warning. Kale met it head-on, his sword describing a gleaming arc that caught the creature mid-leap. Blood sprayed, but the wound only enraged the beast further. It snapped at Kale with terrible teeth, narrowly missing his arm. The Alpha countered with a vicious kick, but the cursed one barely seemed to notice. Mira watched in horror as the combatants circled each other. Kale was clearly the more skilled fighter, but the creature possessed an unnatural resilience. The fight shifted closer to where she stood. Her back met the rough bark of a pine tree, leaving her nowhere else to go. The cursed one seemed to sense her vulnerability, its eyes swiveling in her direction. With a sudden lunge, it broke away from Kale and charged directly at Mira. Acting on pure instinct, Mira dropped and rolled, feeling the rush of air as the cursed one sailed over her. It crashed into the tree, momentarily stunned. Kale was there in an instant, his sword driving deep into the creature's neck. Even then, it continued to thrash until its movements finally stilled. Kale turned to her. Blood spattered across his face. "Are you hurt?" Mira shook her head. "You saved my life." "So I did," he acknowledged. "The debt is not so easily discharged," Kale interrupted. "One act against one danger does not equate to ensuring your survival through the winter, as my law requires." Kyle approached the fallen cursed one. "Once, this was a shifter named Oren. He disappeared during a hunt 3 moons past." "What happened to him?" Mira asked, moving closer. "The curse. It is a malady that affects only our kind. It begins with fever and pain, then progresses to this. The mind goes first, then the ability to control the shift. Eventually they become trapped between forms, neither fully wolf nor human." Mira knelt opposite him. "Is there a cure?" Kale's expression darkened. "No. Once the transformation begins, it cannot be reversed. Death is the only mercy we can offer. How is it contracted? We don't know. It has plagued our kind for generations, striking seemingly at random. Some believe it is a punishment from the moon goddess. Others think it is a natural consequence of our dual nature. And what do you believe? Kyle met her gaze. I believe it is a disease like any other. And like any disease, it must have a cause. And potentially, a cure. The admission surprised Mira. If it's a disease, then perhaps my knowledge of herbal medicine might be of use. I've treated many ailments among my people. Your people are human, Kyle interrupted, though not unkindly. Our physiology is different. Different, yes, but not entirely alien, Mira argued. You bleed as we do. You feel pain as we do. There might be commonalities in how disease affects both our kinds. You would seek a cure for a malady that afflicts those who slaughtered your pack? The question gave Mira pause. Would she? The memory of that terrible night was still raw in her mind. Yet, so too was the image of this once person, twisted by a condition they didn't choose. I am a healer, she said finally. It's what I do. Something shifted in Cale's expression, a softening that transformed his severe features. Then, perhaps there was purpose beyond mere chance in our meeting, Mira of the Valley. It was the first time he had used her name, and the sound of it on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. Cale stood, offering her a hand. Come, we should return before dark. The Cursed Ones are more active at night. Mira accepted his assistance, noting the surprising gentleness of his grip. What about herbs? I've barely begun to gather what I need. We will return tomorrow, Kyle promised, with a larger escort. The forest has proven more dangerous than I anticipated. They set a brisk pace back, Cale constantly alert for danger. You were brave, he said suddenly. Most humans would have panicked. You kept your head. I've had practice staying calm in dangerous situations, Mira replied, thinking of the night her settlement was attacked. That night, Cale said quietly, when I found you beneath the tree roots. I almost killed you. Mira's step faltered. Why didn't you? Cale was silent for several paces. I don't know. Perhaps the moon goddess stayed my hand. Or perhaps... He trailed off. It doesn't matter. What matters is that our paths have crossed again, under very different circumstances. They reached the fortress gates, which swung open at their approach. Return to your quarters, Kyle instructed. I must inform the council about the Cursed One. We'll need to increase patrols. Thank you, Mira said impulsively, for saving my life. Cale studied her for a long moment. It seems we are developing a habit of saving each other, healer. Perhaps the debt between us is more complex than either of us realized. Word of their encounter spread quickly. By evening, Mira had received several visitors, all clearly motivated by curiosity about the incident. The most interesting was an elderly shifter who introduced himself as Theron, one of the council elders, and, she realized, Lysithia's father. Unlike his daughter, Theron possessed a weathered dignity, his amber eyes sharp beneath bushy white brows. So, he said, settling into the chair opposite hers, you are the human healer who has twice saved our Alpha. Once, Mira corrected. Today, he saved me. Theron's lips twitched. Semantics. The fact remains that you have become quite entangled with the Silver Wolf. There was something in his tone that put Mira on edge. I'm merely fulfilling my part of the debt. And yet the Alpha himself escorts you into the forest, rather than assigning a lesser warrior. Curious, is it not? Mira chose her words carefully. I believe he feels personally responsible, and perhaps he wished to ensure I was adequately protected. Indeed, Theron's gaze was penetrating. Our Alpha has always been protective of those under his care, an admirable quality, though sometimes inconvenient for those of us tasked with more practical considerations. Such as his mating with your daughter? Mira asked bluntly. Rather than taking offense, Theron laughed. Direct, aren't you? Yes, the union would be advantageous for both our bloodlines. The council has advocated for it since Lysara's death, but Cale is resistant. Why? The question escaped before Mira could consider its propriety. Forgive me. That's not my business. No, Theron agreed. It isn't. And yet, I find myself curious about your interest. Heat rose to Mira's cheeks. I have no interest beyond understanding the politics of my temporary residence. Of course. Theron's tone suggested he believed nothing of the sort. He rose to his feet. I'll take my leave now, but I suspect we'll speak again soon. Another knock at her door revealed Kyle, his silver hair damp as if from a recent bath. He had exchanged his blood-stained garments for clean ones. "Elder Theron visited you," he stated. Mira nodded. "He seemed interested in our arrangement." "Theron is interested in everything that might impact the Pack's future," Cale replied, moving to stand by the fire. "What did he ask you?" "Mostly about today's incident," Mira replied, choosing not to mention the questions about Cale's reluctance to mate with Lysithea. "He seemed curious about the fact that you personally escorted me. The Council believes I place too much importance on a mere debt," Cale said after a moment. "They do not understand what drives me." "And what does drive you?" Cale met her gaze. "Honor. Without it, we are no better than the beasts we sometimes resemble." The answer was both unexpected and touching. That Cale valued honor so highly spoke to a depth of character Mira hadn't anticipated in the Silver Wolf. "The Council has agreed to increase forest patrols," Cale continued. "The presence of a cursed one so close to the fortress is concerning. It suggests the affliction may be spreading. Have there been many cases recently?" "More than usual. 5 confirmed in the past 3 moons. Normally, we might see 1 or 2 in an entire year." "That is troubling," Mira agreed. "If it's indeed a disease, such a pattern suggests an outbreak." She hesitated. "Would you permit me to examine the next victim, before they're too far gone? Perhaps with early intervention." "It's too dangerous," Kyle cut her off. "The transformation is unpredictable, often violent. Even our strongest warriors have been killed attempting to restrain those in the early stages." Mira persisted. "But if I could identify the symptoms earlier, perhaps develop some treatment to slow the progression." "No." Kyle's tone was final, though not harsh. "I will not risk your life on what may be a fool's errand. The curse has claimed our kind since time beyond memory. Greater healers than you have sought remedies and failed." The dismissal stung, though Mira knew his concern was reasonable. Still, the healer in her rebelled against accepting any malady as incurable. "Then allow me to study your records," she suggested. "Surely your pack keeps accounts of who has been afflicted, when, under what circumstances. Perhaps there's a pattern that has been overlooked." Cale regarded her with a mixture of surprise and reluctant admiration. "You are persistent, healer." "It's a requirement of my profession," Mira replied with a slight smile. "The body does not always surrender its secrets willingly." After a moment's consideration, Cale nodded. "Very well. I will have the records brought to you. But do not raise false hopes among my people. The curse has broken too many already." With that warning, he departed, leaving Mira alone once more with her thoughts. The encounter with the cursed one had given her something she had not expected: purpose. For the first time since the massacre, she had a goal beyond mere survival, a mystery to solve, a potential wrong to right. As she prepared for sleep, Mira found herself wondering what other surprises the northern fortress might hold, and what further complexities lay in the silver eyes of its alpha. The first snow of winter fell 6 weeks after Mira's arrival at the northern fortress. Thick white flakes drifted lazily from a pearl-gray sky, accumulating on the stone parapets and transforming the harsh angles of the fortress into something almost beautiful. Mira watched from her window, a steaming cup of herbal tea warming her hands, her breath fogging the glass. In the weeks since her encounter with the Cursed One, she had carved out a place for herself among the pack. Her healing skills had earned her a grudging respect from even the most suspicious wolves, especially after she had successfully treated a festering wound that might have claimed a young warrior's arm. More surprisingly, she had developed something like a friendship with Vero, whose gruff exterior concealed a keen intellect and unexpected kindness. It was he who had brought her the records she'd requested, meticulously kept accounts of every Cursed One in the pack's history. Those records now lay spread across her table, pages of notes and observations compiled over generations of pack healers. Mira had spent every spare moment poring over them, searching for patterns, commonalities that might shed light on the curse's origin. A knock at her door pulled her from her contemplation of the falling snow. "Enter," she called, expecting Vero with the morning meal. Instead, it was Luca who appeared, the young wolf who had first brought her breakfast weeks ago. Their initial awkward exchange had evolved into a sort of mentorship, with Mira teaching the boy basic healing techniques in exchange for his assistance gathering herbs. "Morning, Mira," he greeted her with an easy familiarity that would have been unthinkable when she first arrived. "The Alpha requests your presence in the Great Hall. The Council is gathering." Mira set down her tea, a flutter of apprehension stirring in her chest. "Did he say why?" Luca shook his head. "No, But Elder Theron was there, and he looked serious. That did nothing to quell Mira's unease. She had seen little of the council elder since their conversation about Cale's reluctance to mate with Lysithea, but she had felt his watchful gaze during the few occasions they had crossed paths. "I'll go at once," she decided, setting aside her tea and reaching for the warmer garments she had been provided for the approaching winter. The simple leather dress and fur-lined cloak were finer than anything she had owned in her valley, a fact that sometimes filled her with discomfort. It felt wrong to enjoy such comforts when her people had suffered and died, but they weren't truly her people anymore, were they? That realization had crept up on her gradually, the understanding that she had no place to return to. The drought would have claimed her valley by now, just as Cale had predicted. Whatever life awaited her after the debt was fulfilled, it would not be the one she had left behind. Luca accompanied her across the snow-dusted courtyard, chattering about the fighting techniques he was learning from Vero. Despite his youth, he had already shown promise as a warrior, though his true passion clearly lay in healing. Mira listened with half an ear, her mind preoccupied with what might await her in the great hall. The massive oak doors stood open, revealing the cavernous space within. A large fire roared in the central hearth, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Around it, seated on benches arranged in a semicircle, were the elders of the pack, 5 in all, including Theron. Kyle stood before them, his tall figure commanding even in such distinguished company. All eyes turned to Mira as she entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. She felt painfully human in that moment, small and fragile among these beings who could transform into apex predators at will. "Healer," Kyle greeted her, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "Join us." Mira approached cautiously, conscious of the heavy silence that followed her progress. Cale's expression revealed nothing, his silver eyes reflecting the firelight without betraying his thoughts. "The council wishes to hear your findings regarding the curse," he explained, once she had reached the circle. "Tell them what you have discovered." Mira's heart skipped a beat. She had shared her preliminary observations with Kyle just days ago, but had not expected to be called before the full council so soon. She cleared her throat, gathering her thoughts. "Elders of the Northern Pack," she began, addressing them with the formal title Cale had taught her. "I have studied your records of the curse with great care. While I cannot yet claim to understand its full nature, certain patterns have emerged that may be significant." Theron leaned forward, his amber eyes sharp with interest. "Speak plainly, human. What have you found?" Mira drew a deep breath. "The curse does not strike randomly, as has been believed. It follows a pattern, one tied to territory, not to bloodlines or individual susceptibility." A murmur ran through the assembled elders. Mira continued, more confident now. "Your records show that outbreaks occur in cycles, approximately every 20 years. Moreover, they begin in the same region each time, the southeastern boundaries of your territory, where it borders the lands claimed by the Southern Pack." "What are you suggesting?" asked a female elder, whose name Mira did not know. "That the Southern Pack somehow spreads this affliction?" "I am suggesting," Mira replied carefully, "that there may be something in that area, a plant, a fungus, perhaps a contaminated water source, that triggers the curse in those exposed to it. The 20-year cycle could correspond to some natural phenomenon, such as the flowering cycle of certain plants or changes in the water table." "Speculation," dismissed another elder, his gray beard bristling as he spoke. "You have no proof." "Not yet," Mira acknowledged. "But consider, in the most recent outbreak, all 5 affected shifters had been part of the same hunting party along the southeastern border. According to the records, similar clustering has occurred in previous outbreaks." Cale, who had remained silent during her explanation, now spoke. "What would you propose, healer?" Mira met his gaze steadily. "An expedition to the southeastern territory. I need to examine the area, collect samples of plants, water, soil, anything that might harbor the cause of the curse." A shocked silence followed her suggestion. Then, as one, the elders began to protest. "Impossible! The borderlands are dangerous, especially in winter. We cannot spare the warriors to escort a human on such a foolish errand." Kyle raised a hand, and the protests ceased immediately. "There is merit in the healer's suggestion," he said, his tone measured. "If there is even a chance that the curse's source lies in our territory, we are duty-bound to investigate." Theron's eyes narrowed. You would risk warriors' lives on this human's theory? I would risk my own life, Kale replied with quiet force. I will lead the expedition myself. This declaration stunned even Mira. The Alpha rarely left the fortress for extended periods, especially during winter when the pack was most vulnerable to attack. This is madness, Theron declared, rising to his feet. The Alpha's place is with his pack, not traipsing through dangerous territory with a human who may be leading him into a trap. Mira stiffened at the accusation. I have no reason to wish harm on anyone here, she protested. I seek only to understand a disease that threatens your people. Your people slaughtered dozens of ours before we retaliated, the female elder pointed out coldly. Revenge would be a powerful motivation. My people? Mira's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. The people I called my own are dead, killed by your Alpha in what he claimed was vengeance for harboring your enemies. If I sought revenge, I had my chance when he lay wounded at my feet. Instead, I chose to heal. A heavy silence followed her outburst. Mira could feel Kale's gaze upon her, intense and evaluating, but she kept her eyes fixed on the elders who would judge her worth. The human speaks truth, Kale said finally. She has earned the right to be heard. Theron scoffed. Because of a life debt? A technicality that, because she has proven herself, Kyle interrupted, his tone hardening. While we debate in comfort, she studies our records, seeks cures for our ailments, and offers insights none of our own healers have provided in generations. I ask you, elders, what have we to lose by investigating her theory? The gray-bearded elder grunted. Our Alpha, potentially. And for what? A cure that may not exist for a disease we have endured for centuries. For hope, Kale answered simply. Something our pack has had precious little of since the curse claimed Lysara. The mention of Kale's deceased mate sent a ripple through the assembly. Mira saw the pain that crossed the elders' faces, the way they exchanged glances laden with shared grief. The expedition will proceed, Kyle declared, his tone making it clear this was no longer open for debate. I will take a small party. Varro, 2 warriors of my choosing, and the healer. We leave at first light tomorrow. And if you do not return? Theron challenged. Who will lead in your absence? Who will take your place if the worst occurs? Kale's expression hardened. I have named no successor because I do not intend to fall. But if fate decrees otherwise, the council will choose a worthy Alpha from among the pack's strongest warriors. His gaze swept the assembly, daring further challenge. When none came, he dismissed the council with a curt nod. Prepare for our departure, healer, he instructed Mira. Bring whatever you need for your investigations. Without waiting for a response, he strode from the hall, leaving Mira alone with the elder's suspicious stares. She departed quickly, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The expedition was happening, but at what cost to her fragile position within the pack? Preparations consumed the remainder of the day. Mira gathered her healing supplies, herbs, and empty containers for collecting samples. Varro provided her with furs and boots better suited for the harsh winter terrain they would traverse, along with a small knife that, unlike her previous one, was sharp enough to serve as a weapon if needed. The Alpha takes a great risk for you, the Beta observed as he showed her how to secure the knife's sheath to her belt. Not all in the pack understand his decision. I didn't ask him to come personally, Mira replied, testing the knife's weight in her hand. He could have sent others. Varro's scarred face twisted in what might have been a smile. Could he? I wonder. Before Mira could question this cryptic remark, a commotion from the courtyard drew their attention. Raised voices echoed against the stone walls, one of them unmistakably Kale's. Mira and Varro exchanged a glance before hurrying outside. In the center of the courtyard, Kale stood locked in heated argument with Lysithea. The female shifter's face was flushed with anger, her amber eyes flashing as she confronted the Alpha. You would risk everything for her? Lysithea demanded, loud enough for all present to hear. A human who means nothing to this pack? Kale's response was too low for Mira to catch, but whatever he said only seemed to enrage Lysithea further. You forget your place, she hissed. My father and the council have favored our union for years. Would you throw that away for some temporary fascination with a mortal who will wither and die while you remain strong? Now Kale's voice rose, cold and dangerous. I forget nothing, Lysithea. It is you who forgets whom you address. I am Alpha here, and my decisions are not subject to your approval. Lysithea's gaze shifted, landing on Mira with such hatred that she felt it like a physical blow. "This is her doing," she spat. "She has bewitched you somehow." "Enough!" Kale's command reverberated through the courtyard, carrying the full weight of his alpha authority. Even Mira, immune to the supernatural compulsion that affected shifters, felt its power. Lysithea flinched, instinctively lowering her eyes in submission. But the anger did not leave her face. "You will regret this choice," she warned before stalking away, her rigid posture broadcasting fury with every step. Kyle watched her go, his expression unreadable. Only when she had disappeared into one of the buildings did he seem to notice Mira and Vero standing nearby. "A difference of opinion," he stated, as if that explained everything. "The expedition proceeds as planned." Vero nodded, though Mira didn't miss the concern that flickered across his scarred features. "I'll see to the final preparations, Alpha." As the beta moved away, Kale turned his full attention to Mira. "Are you ready for what lies ahead, healer? The journey will be difficult. The danger's real." "I'm ready," Mira assured him, though in truth, her confidence had been shaken by Lysithea's outburst. "I wouldn't have suggested this if I didn't believe it was important." Kale studied her for a long moment, his silver eyes unreadable. "No," he agreed finally, "you would not. That is why I trust your judgment in this matter, despite the Council's reservations." The simple statement of faith warmed Mira more than it should have. "I won't let you down," she promised. A ghost of a smile touched Kale's lips. "See that you don't. Dawn comes early and we have far to travel." That night, as Mira completed her preparations, a soft knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Luca, his young face solemn in the dim light of the corridor. "I brought you this," he said, extending a small leather pouch. "For your journey." Mira accepted it, feeling the weight of dried herbs within. "What is it?" "Mountain tea," Luca explained. "It helps with the cold, keeps your blood warm. My mother taught me how to prepare it before she was taken by the curse." The simple gesture touched Mira deeply. "Thank you, Luca. I'll think of you when I drink it." The boy nodded, hesitating as if wanting to say more. Finally, he blurted, "Be careful. The southern territories are dangerous, even for wolves." "I will," Mira promised. "And when I return, we'll continue your healing lessons." With a final nod, Luca departed, leaving Mira to contemplate the unexpected connections she had formed in this place that had once seemed so alien. Dawn broke clear and cold, the sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered courtyard where the expedition party gathered. Kyle and Vero stood conversing quietly, while two younger warriors, Taryn and Nyx, checked their supplies and weapons. Mira approached, bundled in the furs Vero had provided, her satchel heavy with the tools of her trade. Kyle acknowledged her with a nod, his silver eyes assessing her preparedness. "The journey to the southeastern border will take 3 days," he informed her. "We travel on foot. Can you keep pace?" "I'll manage," Mira replied, unwilling to admit any weakness that might jeopardize the mission. "She can ride with me when she tires," Vero offered, surprising her. "I'm large enough in wolf form to carry her without slowing our progress." Kyle considered this, then nodded. "A practical solution. Let us depart. Daylight is precious in winter." They left through the main gates, Mira walking between Kale and Vero, while Taryn and Nyx took positions as scouts ahead and behind. The snow crunched beneath their boots, pristine and untouched, save for the occasional track of wild game. As they moved deeper into the forest, Mira marveled at the transformed landscape. Trees she had come to know during her herb-gathering expeditions now stood draped in white, their branches bowing under the weight of snow. The air was sharp and clean, each breath visible as a cloud of vapor that dissipated quickly in the cold. Kyle set a demanding pace, but Mira refused to complain. She focused on placing one foot before the other, conserving her energy for the long journey ahead. When they paused briefly at midday, she sipped the mountain tea Luca had provided, grateful for its warming effect. "You're stronger than you look, human," observed Nyx, the female warrior, as they resumed their march. Though the words were not unkind, they carried a note of surprise that reminded Mira of her outsider status. "Necessity breeds endurance," she replied simply. Nyx tilted her head, considering this. "True enough. We shall see if that endurance lasts the journey." By nightfall, Mira's determination was tested severely. Every muscle protested, and her feet, despite the quality of her boots, were developing painful blisters. Still, she refused Vero's offer to carry her, pride keeping her upright when exhaustion threatened to claim her. They made camp in a small clearing, the warriors quickly establishing a perimeter and building a fire that cast a warm glow on the surrounding snow. Kale disappeared briefly, returning with a freshly killed rabbit that was swiftly prepared and cooked. As they ate in companionable silence, Mira found herself studying the Alpha surreptitiously. In the wilderness, away from the politics and pressures of the fortress, he seemed more at ease. The perpetual tension that marked his features had softened somewhat, though vigilance never entirely left his silver eyes. "You should rest," he told her when the meal was finished. "Tomorrow will test your endurance further." Mira nodded, too tired to argue. She settled into the shelter of furs the warriors had arranged for her, close enough to the fire for warmth, but not so near as to risk sparks. Sleep came swiftly, deep and dreamless, until something startled her awake in the darkest hours of the night. She lay still, listening. The fire had burned low, casting just enough light to make out the forms of the sleeping warriors. Varro kept watch, his silhouette visible at the edge of the clearing. Then she realized what had woken her. Kyle was gone. Concerned, Mira slipped from her furs and moved quietly to where Varro stood, his back to the camp as he scanned the darkness beyond. "The Alpha?" she asked softly, coming to stand beside him. Varro didn't seem surprised by her approach. "He walks the perimeter. It is his way, especially on nights when sleep eludes him." "Does that happen often?" The beta's scarred face revealed nothing. "Often enough. The burden of leadership is not easily set aside, even in slumber." Mira nodded, understanding more than Varro might have guessed. As a healer, she had witnessed how responsibility could weigh on a person, disrupting rest and peace of mind. "You care for him," Varro observed, his tone neutral. "He is my patient," Mira replied carefully. "I care for all under my healing touch." Varro's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Is that what he is to you? A patient?" Before Mira could formulate a response, a shadow detached itself from the darkness at the clearing's edge. Kale approached, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "You should be resting, healer," he said, his deep voice carrying easily despite its softness. "As should you, Alpha," Mira countered without thinking. Kale's eyebrows rose slightly at her boldness, but he didn't rebuke her. "The night calls to our kind," he explained. "The wolf within us is never more restless than under a winter moon." Mira glanced upward, noticing for the first time the nearly full moon hanging low in the sky, partially obscured by wispy clouds. "Does it affect the curse?" she asked. "Your records weren't clear on whether lunar cycles influence the progression of the disease." A shadow crossed Kale's features. "Some claim the transformation accelerates during the full moon, but there is no consistent evidence. The curse follows its own cruel timeline, regardless of celestial influences." Mira nodded, filing away this information for future consideration. "I should return to sleep," she said, suddenly aware of the intimate nature of their conversation, with Varro standing silently nearby and the sleeping warriors just steps away. "Indeed," Kyle's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Dawn is not far off, and the journey grows more challenging from here." Mira retreated to her furs, but sleep proved elusive now. Her mind turned over everything she had learned about the curse, trying to fit disparate pieces into a coherent whole. And beneath these professional considerations ran a current of something more personal, an awareness of Kale that transcended their roles as Alpha and healer. When had he become more than the silver wolf who had slaughtered her people? When had she begun to see the man behind the monster of her memories? These troubling thoughts accompanied her into a fitful sleep, haunted by dreams of silver eyes watching from the darkness. The next 2 days of travel brought them ever closer to the southeastern border. The terrain grew steadily more rugged, the forest giving way to rocky outcroppings and steep ravines that required careful navigation. Snow continued to fall intermittently, adding to the challenge. On the afternoon of the third day, Kale called a halt at the edge of a deep valley. "We have reached the borderlands," he announced, his voice carrying a note of caution. "From here, we proceed with heightened vigilance. The southern pack has been known to send scouts this far north." Mira gazed down into the valley, struck by its eerie stillness. Unlike the healthy forest they had traveled through, this area seemed somehow wrong. The trees twisted and stunted, the underbrush withered despite the protective cover of snow. "What is this place?" she asked, a sense of foreboding settling over her. "The Shadowed Valley," Varro replied grimly. It is avoided by all sensible creatures. Game is scarce, water bitter. Even the birds fall silent when crossing its expanse. Mira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "This is where we need to go," she said with sudden certainty. "This is where the curse begins." Kyle nodded, his expression grave. "I had suspected as much. The first cursed ones in our records were found here, though few have made the connection over the generations. They descended cautiously into the valley, the warriors shifting seamlessly between human and wolf forms as they scouted the path ahead. Mira walked beside Kale, her senses alert for anything unusual. As they reached the valley floor, she noticed a strange bitter smell in the air, barely perceptible, but distinctly unpleasant. "Do you smell that?" she asked Kale. He nodded, his nostrils flaring. "It grows stronger toward the center of the valley. That is our destination." The source of the smell became apparent as they approached a small, dark pool, nestled among rocks at the valley's heart. Its waters were unnaturally still, with an oily sheen that reflected light in sickly rainbows. Around its edges grew a fungus unlike any Mira had ever seen, black and glistening, its fruiting bodies resembling miniature claws reaching toward the sky. "Don't touch anything," she warned, though the caution was likely unnecessary. Everything about this place screamed danger to even the most untrained senses. Mira knelt at the pool's edge, careful not to make contact with either water or fungus. She withdrew several empty vials from her satchel, along with a pair of wooden tongs she had crafted for collecting potentially harmful specimens. With methodical precision, she gathered samples of the fungus, the contaminated soil, and, most cautiously of all, the dark water. Each specimen was sealed in its own container and carefully labeled. "Is it enough?" Kale asked when she had finished, his silver eyes fixed on the sinister pool. "For now," Mira replied, securing the samples in her satchel. "I need to examine these under controlled conditions, but I'm certain this is the source, or at least part of it." Vero, who had been circling the area in wolf form, shifted back to human, his expression troubled. "There are bones," he reported. "Animal mostly, but some appear human, or shifter." Kale's jaw tightened. "Victims of the curse who found their way back to the source? Or those who never left?" Mira suggested grimly. "The first to be afflicted, perhaps." A low growl from Terran, still in wolf form at the valley's edge, alerted them to potential danger. Kale signaled for silence, his body tensing as he scanned their surroundings. Then they heard it, the unmistakable sound of branches snapping under careless feet, approaching from the south. "Southern pack," Vero whispered, already beginning the shift back to wolf form. Kale grabbed Mira's arm, pulling her close. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice barely audible. "If fighting begins, run north. Terran will escort you back to the fortress." Mira wanted to protest, but the urgency in Kale's eyes silenced her. She nodded, clutching her satchel with its precious cargo. The intruders emerged from the tree line. 3 shifters in human form, armed with crude spears, tipped with what appeared to be silver. Their clothing marked them as Southern pack, with symbols Mira didn't recognize sewn into the leather. They halted abruptly upon seeing Kale's party, surprise evident on their faces. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, the leader of the Southern group smiled, a feral expression devoid of warmth. "Well, well," he called across the clearing. "The great silver wolf himself, so far from his fortress. What brings you to our territory, Alpha Kale?" "Your territory?" Kale's voice was dangerously soft. "The border lies south of the valley, as it has for generations." The Southern shifter's smile widened. "Borders change, especially when those who claim the land are weak." Beside Kyle, Vero growled low in his throat, the sound hardly human despite his current form. Nyx had shifted to wolf, her hackles raised as she positioned herself protectively near Mira. "We have no quarrel with you today," Kyle said, his tone making it clear this was a temporary condition. "Leave us, and there need be no blood spilled." The Southern leader laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the still air of the valley. "Always so noble, so restrained. It will be your downfall, Silver Wolf, just as it was your mate's." Mira felt Kale stiffen beside her, a ripple of tension passing through his powerful frame. "Careful," he warned, and in that single word lay a promise of violence barely contained. "Oh, did I touch a nerve?" the Southerner taunted. "Poor Lysara, so brave, so beautiful, so easily broken." Kale moved with such speed that Mira barely registered it, One moment he stood beside her, the next he had crossed half the distance to the southern shifters, his form blurring as he changed from man to wolf in mid-leap. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.